I stood at the edge of the gymnasium, watching my sister Madison adjust the rhinestone crown on her perfect blonde head, and I felt nothing. Not the crushing despair I'd felt in my first life when she'd stolen it from me. Not the rage that had burned through my chest as I'd watched her accept my crown, my title, my moment. Just nothing. Because in my purse, folded carefully in an embossed envelope, was a letter that made her cheap plastic tiara look like exactly what it was. A child's toy. The letter was from Ravencrest Academy in Switzerland. Full scholarship. Plus a personal invitation from Duchess Helena Rothschild herself to spend the summer at her family's estate, with an offer to introduce me to Europe's elite, the same Duchess who sat on the boards of 3 Fortune 500 companies and whose recommendation could open any door in the world. Madison caught my eye and smirked, that same cruel little smile I remembered from before. In my first life, that smile had broken me. Tonight, it just made me want to laugh. "Enjoying the show, Vera?" she called across the crowded dance floor, loud enough for people to hear. "I know you worked so hard. It's just too bad about, well, everything." In my previous life, I would have run from the room crying. Instead, I smiled back, serene and unbothered. "You look beautiful, Madison. Really, enjoy your night." Her smirk faltered just for a second. She wasn't used to me being calm, confident. She was used to the Vera who could be broken with a word, destroyed with a glance. But that Vera had died 6 months ago at 23 years old, alone in a studio apartment, her body not found for a week. And when I'd woken up on my 16th birthday, 6 months before this homecoming dance, I'd woken up with 7 years of memories that gave me the most powerful advantage anyone could have. I knew exactly how everything would turn out if I did nothing. The first thing I'd noticed when I opened my eyes that morning in January was that my room wasn't my room. It was too big, too bright, too clean. My studio apartment had been small and dark, with water stains on the ceiling and a heater that never quite worked. But this room had my old posters on the walls, my childhood books on the shelves, my high school backpack hanging on the door. I'd scrambled out of bed and run to the mirror, and the face staring back at me wasn't the hollow-cheeked, prematurely aged face I'd gotten used to seeing. It was me at 16. Round cheeks, clear skin, eyes that hadn't yet learned what betrayal and poverty and absolute loneliness looked like. I'd stood there for a full 5 minutes, touching my face, my hair, my body, trying to understand. And then I'd heard Madison's laugh from downstairs, that musical sound that everyone loved, and it had all come crashing back. My sister, my beautiful, talented, beloved older sister, who everyone adored, who our parents worshipped, who had spent our entire childhood making sure I knew exactly how much less I was worth than her. But it wasn't just childhood cruelty that I remembered. I remembered everything. Every choice, every betrayal, every moment where Madison had systematically destroyed my life while smiling for the cameras. I remembered how she'd sabotaged my college applications, deleting my essays the night before deadlines, and then expressing such sweet concern when I forgot to submit them. How she'd stolen my scholarship essay and submitted it as her own, winning $50,000 that paid for her Ivy League education while I'd scrambled for community college. I remembered how she'd seduced my first serious boyfriend, not because she wanted him, but because she couldn't stand to see me happy. How she'd convinced our parents to give her my college fund because her opportunities were better. How she'd borrowed $10,000 from me and never paid it back, then acted wounded when I'd asked about it. I remembered every birthday where her gift overshadowed mine, every achievement of mine that she either claimed credit for or diminished. Every time she'd cried victim and our parents had taken her side without question, leaving me to apologize for things I hadn't done. But most of all, I remembered what came after. After high school, after college, after she'd married rich and I'd struggled to pay rent. I remembered how she'd had me fired from 3 different jobs by calling in favors from her husband's connections, always with plausible deniability. How she'd turned our entire family against me, painting me as jealous and unstable. How I'd eventually found myself completely alone, with no money, no prospects, no family, no hope. I remembered the night I'd called her, desperate, asking for help one last time. And I remembered her laugh before she hung up. 3 weeks later, I'd died. Pneumonia, officially. But really, I'd died of poverty and loneliness and the absolute despair of having been systematically destroyed by the person who should have loved me most. And now, I was back. 6 months before homecoming, 7 years before my death, with all the knowledge of how everything would unfold if I let it. That morning, I'd sat on my bed and made a simple decision. Not this time. The homecoming crown was always going to be Madison's. She'd wanted it since freshman year, had positioned herself for it with calculated precision. In my first life, I'd been naive enough to think I had a chance. I'd been nominated. I'd been popular enough, kind enough, involved enough. I'd actually believed that maybe just once I could have something that was mine. I should have known better. 3 days before the vote in my first life, Madison had started a rumor. Nothing too dramatic, nothing she could be blamed for. Just a quiet word here and there that I'd been saying cruel things about various people. Screenshots of texts that looked like they came from my phone but didn't, expressing nasty opinions I'd never held. A TikTok video with audio that sounded almost like my voice, mocking someone's appearance. By the time the vote happened, I was a pariah. Madison won by a landslide, and when I'd tried to defend myself, tried to say the text and video were fake, everyone had looked at me with pity. Poor Vera, so jealous of her perfect sister that she'd invent conspiracy theories rather than admit Madison was just better. Our parents had sat me down for a concerned talk about my attitude. Madison had hugged me, told me she loved me, said she hoped I could be happy for her. And I'd gone to homecoming and watched her crowned, feeling like my heart was being ripped out of my chest. It was the first major battle in a war I hadn't known I was fighting, and I'd lost it completely. But that was then. This time, I knew the playbook. This time, I was playing a completely different game. The morning after I'd woken up, in my 16-year-old body, I'd started planning. I had 6 months until homecoming, 7 years until my death, and a head full of knowledge about how the world would change. Stock markets, crypto, which startups would explode and which would fail, which trends would dominate social media, which investments would pay off. But more than that, I knew things about people. I knew which teacher was embezzling from the school fund. I knew which local politician was having an affair. I knew which investment banker was about to get caught in a scandal. I knew everything that would make headlines over the next 7 years, and I knew exactly how to use that information. I'd started small. I'd taken the $500 I'd saved from birthday and Christmas money over the years and invested it. Bitcoin was still cheap. I knew exactly when to buy and when to sell. Within a week, I'd turned $500 into $3,000. Within a month, $15,000. Within 3 months, I had over $200,000 in a private account my parents knew nothing about. But money alone wasn't enough. In my first life, Madison had won because she'd controlled the narrative. She'd been popular, beloved, perfectly positioned. So this time, I focused on something she could never touch, genuine connections outside our little high school bubble. I'd started a blog about financial literacy for teens. I'd known exactly which topics would go viral, exactly which moments to post, exactly how to phrase things to catch the algorithm. Within weeks, I had 50,000 followers. Within 2 months, 200,000. By month 4, I had over 1 million subscribers across multiple platforms, a book deal in the works, and invitations to speak at conferences. Madison didn't even notice at first. She was so focused on high school popularity, on being queen bee of our tiny kingdom, that she didn't see me building an empire outside those walls. Our parents noticed, though. Dad, a failed businessman who'd spent my childhood making and losing small fortunes, suddenly became very interested in my little hobby. Mom, who'd always preferred Madison's beauty pageant wins to anything I did, started mentioning my social media thing at her book club, but always with a slightly confused tone, as if she couldn't quite understand why people cared. "It's very nice, honey," she'd said when I showed her my first brand partnership offer worth $5,000. "But don't let it distract you from school, and don't forget your sister's needs. She's applying to Yale, and we all need to support her." Right, support Madison, always Madison. In my first life, I would have swallowed that and said nothing. This time, I just smiled and said, "Of course, Mom." while thinking about the Yale acceptance letter I'd seen Madison receive in my previous life. The acceptance that she'd gotten partially because she'd stolen my essay, the one I'd spent 6 months crafting about overcoming adversity. She'd changed a few words and submitted it as her own story, and it had worked. Not this time. This time, I'd subtly, carefully, ensured that essay could never be stolen. I'd saved it in encrypted files. I'd submitted it early to a scholarship competition that made it public record attached to my name. When Madison had tried to access my computer, I'd caught her, of course, I knew she'd try. All she'd found were decoy documents. But I hadn't confronted her. Confrontation was what she expected, what she wanted. It gave her ammunition to play victim. Instead, I'd just smiled and pretended not to notice. By April, 3 months before homecoming, my life had diverged so dramatically from my first timeline that I almost felt like a different person. I had money. I had a growing platform. I had opportunities that Madison couldn't even imagine. But most importantly, I'd cultivated a relationship that was going to change everything. Duchess Helena Rothschild. I'd known from my first life that the Duchess would give a TED Talk in New York City in April. I'd known because in my previous life, I'd watched it online while eating ramen in my apartment, wishing I could have had opportunities like that. I'd remembered her words about supporting young entrepreneurs, about finding diamonds in the rough. This time, I'd made sure she found me. I'd positioned my content to cross her radar. I'd engaged thoughtfully with her foundation's social media. I'd written an article about financial literacy that her team had shared. And when her assistant had reached out about a possible feature in their youth entrepreneur spotlight, I'd been ready. The interview had been via video call, but the Duchess herself had joined halfway through. She was 70, sharp as a knife, with eyes that missed nothing. "You're quite remarkable," she'd said, studying me through the screen. 16 years old, this level of financial acuity, this ability to communicate complex ideas simply. Tell me, Vera, what drives you? I'd thought about lying, about giving her some inspiring speech about helping people. Instead, I'd decided to tell her a version of the truth. "I don't want to be helpless," I'd said quietly. "I've seen what happens to women who depend entirely on others for their security, their worth, their future. I want to build something that can never be taken from me." She'd leaned forward. "And who would take it from you?" "Anyone who could," I'd answered. "The world isn't kind to women who don't have their own power." She'd been quiet for a long moment. Then she'd smiled. "Would you like to visit me this summer? I host a salon for young women of exceptional promise. We spend 6 weeks at my estate in Switzerland. Educational opportunities, networking, mentorship. I think you'd find it valuable." I'd accepted, of course. I'd known what this meant. The Duchess's salon was legendary. Women who attended went on to run companies, countries, industries. It was an opportunity that money couldn't buy. And Madison would never even know it existed. By June, Madison had begun to notice that something was different. I was gone more often, doing speaking engagements and podcast interviews. I had money for nice clothes now, though I kept most of my wealth hidden. I had confidence that didn't crumble when she made her little comments. She didn't like it. "You're getting awfully full of yourself," she'd said one morning, watching me pack for a weekend financial literacy conference in Chicago. "All this social media stuff is going to your head. You know none of it is real, right?" "What do you mean?" I'd asked, though I knew exactly what she meant. She was worried. Her favorite toy wasn't playing the game right anymore. "I mean, you have internet followers. That's not the same as real friends. Real success. Anyone can get lucky online. What matters is what you achieve in real life with real people." "You're absolutely right," I'd said, smiling. "How's your college application going? I know Yale is your dream." Her expression had tightened. She'd tried to steal my essay and found nothing useful. She'd tried to sabotage my recommendations and realized I'd already secured them through my platform connections, not through school. She was starting to understand that the rules had changed. "It's going great," she'd said coldly. "Dad says I'm a shoo-in." Dad, right. In my first life, Dad had given Madison my college fund, $25,000 that my grandmother had left specifically for me to help with her opportunities. He'd said it was just temporary, that he'd pay it back. He never had. This time, the moment I'd turned 16, I'd legally move that money into a trust account only I could access. When Dad had asked about helping Madison with application fees and prep courses, I'd played dumb. "Oh, didn't you know? Grandma set it up so I can't touch it until college. Something about making sure it's used correctly. I wish I could help." Madison had been furious, but there was nothing she could do. The money was locked away, safe from her schemes. July arrived, and with it, the homecoming campaign season began. In our school, homecoming court was announced in July, voted on in August, and crowned at the September dance. It was a months-long popularity contest that dominated everyone's summer. Madison launched her campaign with characteristic precision: poster boards with professional photos, a social media blitz, carefully orchestrated photo ops doing charity work. She'd always been good at this, at making herself look perfect. I was nominated too, just like in my first life. But this time, I knew what was coming. In the original timeline, this is when Madison had started her whisper campaign against me. When the fake screenshots and manipulated videos would start to appear. When she'd systematically destroy my reputation so thoroughly that, by voting time, I'd be lucky to get 10 votes. I'd spent the past 6 months preparing for this exact moment. The first fake screenshot appeared in mid-July, posted by one of Madison's friends to a private Instagram story. Private, except that I'd been added to the close friends list through a dummy account. It showed my number sending a cruel message about another student. In my first life, I'd never figured out how she'd done it. This time, with my adult knowledge and resources, I'd done my research. Fake message generators, spoofed numbers, photo manipulation apps. All easily accessible, all impossible to definitively disprove if you were a 16-year-old without resources. But I wasn't that 16-year-old anymore. I'd prepared for this. I'd set up a consultation with a digital forensics expert paying with my own money. I'd documented every conversation I had through official backups. I'd even set up a system that timestamped and verified my messages through a secure service. When the first screenshot emerged, I didn't panic. I quietly gathered evidence, documented the fake message, and traced its origin through metadata that Madison hadn't known to scrub. Then I waited. 3 more fake messages appeared over the next week, each showing me saying something horrible. I watched my phone fill with concerned messages. I watched people start to look at me differently. I watched Madison play the concerned sister, publicly defending me while privately fanning the flames. And I waited, because I knew what she didn't. I was already gone. In 2 weeks, I'd be leaving for Switzerland, for the Duchess's salon. I'd be spending 6 weeks networking with some of the most powerful young women in the world. I'd be positioning myself for opportunities that made homecoming court look like a kindergarten game. The homecoming crown was bait, and Madison was about to bite down hard. The night before I left for Switzerland, our parents hosted a family dinner. Just the 4 of us, like old times. Except nothing was like old times, not really. "We're so proud of you, Vera," Mom said, though her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "This Switzerland trip sounds very educational." "It is," I said simply. I hadn't told them much. Just that I'd been invited to an international summer program for young entrepreneurs. "Of course it's taking you away for most of the summer," Madison said, spearing a piece of chicken with more force than necessary. "Right during homecoming season. Some people might think you're running away." "Running away from what?" I asked innocently. "Oh, all the drama, those messages people say you sent. It must be so stressful." I smiled. "I'm not worried about it. The truth has a way of coming out." Dad cleared his throat. "Speaking of your trip, Vera, about the costs." "Already handled," I said. "Full scholarship, plus a travel stipend. It's not costing the family anything." "Still," Dad continued, "we should discuss your college fund. Madison needs—" "The trust account is legally protected until I start college," I interrupted gently. "Remember, Grandma was very specific." His jaw tightened. Madison's eyes narrowed. Mom looked uncomfortable. "Family supports family, Vera," Madison said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "I'd help you if you needed it." "That's good to know," I said, meeting her eyes. "I'll remember that." The look she gave me was pure venom, there for just a second before the sweet sister mask slid back into place. But I'd seen it, and I knew, in that moment, that she understood. The game had changed, and she didn't know the new rules. Switzerland was everything I'd remembered and more. The Duchess's estate was a castle, literally. 16th century, perched on a mountainside, with views that made you believe in fairy tales. But the real magic was inside. 20 young women, aged 16 to 22, from around the world. All brilliant, all driven, all hungry for success in ways that Madison couldn't comprehend. These weren't girls fighting over a plastic crown. These were future CEOs, politicians, entrepreneurs, changemakers. The Duchess had curated the group with precision. There was Amara from Nigeria, already running a tech startup valued at $3 million. Sophia from Italy, whose family owned a fashion empire, but who was determined to make her own mark in sustainable manufacturing. Jin Hee from South Korea, a classical pianist who was revolutionizing music education. And they took me seriously. Not as a kid with a cute blog, but as an equal, because here, accomplishment mattered, vision mattered, what you built mattered. The 6 weeks were intense. Morning sessions on economics, business strategy, international law, afternoon workshops on leadership, public speaking, negotiation. Evenings spent in the Duchess's library, having conversations that ranged from philosophy to practical applications of emerging technologies. But the real value was in the relationships. These women were going places, and they remembered who helped them along the way. By the end of the first week, I had genuine friendships forming. By the end of the second week, I had business partnerships being discussed. By the time we reached week 3, I had opportunities being offered that would set the trajectory of my entire life. Amara wanted to expand her tech startup to North America and needed a partner who understood the market. Jin Hee was launching an online platform and wanted my help with the marketing strategy. Sophia's family was investing in emerging brands and asked if I'd be interested in consulting. Every conversation was an open door. Every connection was a potential future. And through it all, the Duchess watched, guided, and occasionally offered advice that was worth more than gold. "You have something rare," she told me one evening as we walked through her rose garden. "You understand that power isn't about controlling others. It's about freeing yourself from their control." "Is that why you do this?" I asked. "The salon, the mentorship?" "I do it because no one did it for me," she said. "I had to fight for every scrap of respect, every opportunity. I watched women tear each other down for the entertainment of men who didn't care about either of them. So now I build something different. A network. A sisterhood. A system where women help each other rise instead of pulling each other down." I thought about Madison, about our mother, about the women in my first life who'd sided with her against me because it was easier, safer, more comfortable. What if someone doesn't want to rise together? I asked. What if they only know how to climb by pushing others down? The Duchess was quiet for a moment. "Then they don't get invited to the garden," she said simply. "Let them have their little kingdoms. We're building empires." Back home, Madison was busy destroying my reputation. I knew because I was still monitoring social media, still had friends sending me screenshots. The fake messages had multiplied. A video had surfaced, clearly edited, clearly manipulated, but convincing enough to people who wanted to believe. My supposed friends were divided. Some defended me, others, especially those in Madison's orbit, turned on me with enthusiastic cruelty. The homecoming court drama had become the story of the summer, but I was in Switzerland, shaking hands with people who would matter for the rest of my life. I was learning from women who ran multi-billion-dollar companies. I was forging bonds with future world leaders. The homecoming crown suddenly seemed very, very small. I returned home in late August, a week before school started. The house felt smaller somehow, more cramped. Or maybe I'd just gotten used to castles. "How was your trip?" Mom asked, her tone suggesting she hoped I'd say it was boring and I'd learned my lesson about getting above myself. "Incredible," I said simply. "Life-changing." Madison was at cheer practice, probably preparing for the homecoming rally. Dad was at work. Mom and I sat in the kitchen, and for a moment, I saw something flicker across her face. Curiosity? Regret? It was gone too quickly to tell. "Vera," she said carefully, "there have been some rumors while you were gone about things you said, messages you sent. Madison tried to defend you, but—" "I know about the messages," I interrupted gently. "They're fake, completely fabricated. I have digital forensic evidence proving it." She blinked. You have what? I know who made them. I know how they were made. I have timestamps, metadata, everything proving they're fake. I've been waiting to see how far it would go before I revealed the evidence. Why would you wait? She asked, confused. Why not clear your name immediately? Because, I said, I wanted to see who would believe lies about me without question, and who wouldn't. It's been very educational. She looked uncomfortable. Well, I'm sure it's all just a misunderstanding. Madison would never. Madison has been sabotaging me since we were children, I said calmly. I know you don't want to believe it, but it's true, and I'm done pretending otherwise. Vera. Her voice had that warning tone, the one that usually preceded a lecture about being supportive of my sister. That's a very serious accusation. It's not an accusation, it's a fact. But don't worry, Mom, I'm not asking you to choose between us or even to believe me. I'm just done pretending I don't notice. I stood up, grabbed my bag, and headed upstairs. Behind me, I heard her say something, but I didn't stop. I had emails to answer from Switzerland, real opportunities to pursue, actual futures to build. The homecoming drama was almost over, and I was about to win a game Madison didn't even know we were playing. School started the Tuesday after Labor Day. The homecoming dance was scheduled for the following Saturday. The vote for homecoming court had happened online over the summer, with results to be announced at Friday's rally. I walked into school that first day wearing clothes that cost more than they should have. Designer pieces I'd bought with my own money, styled carefully to look effortless. My skin was tan from Swiss sunshine. My hair was professionally cut from a salon visit in Zurich. I looked healthy, happy, confident. Madison, holding court by her locker with her cheer squad, did a double take when she saw me. Vera, you're back! She rushed over, all smiles, playing the devoted sister for the crowd. How was your summer camp? It wasn't camp, I said mildly. It was an entrepreneurial leadership salon hosted by Duchess Helena Rothschild at her family estate in Switzerland. The words hung in the air. Around us, people stopped to listen. Madison's smile froze. How nice, she managed. I didn't realize you were hanging out with royalty. Well, minor royalty, I said, as if it were no big deal. And mostly just incredibly successful businesswomen. It was very educational. I saw it happen in real time. The recalculation. Madison's eyes darted around, seeing people looking at me differently, hearing the whispers starting. In high school, credentials mattered. And I'd just dropped credentials that made homecoming court look like a participation trophy. That's great, Madison said, her voice tight. So I guess you heard about all the drama this summer? Those fake messages? Oh, I know they were fake, I said cheerfully. I had a digital forensics expert verify it. Really interesting, actually. Apparently, they used a message generator app that leaves distinct metadata traces. And the number spoofing was pretty amateur. There's a clear trail back to the original device. The color drained from her face. What are you saying? I'm saying I know exactly who made them and how they did it, I said, still smiling. I've been documenting everything for potential legal action. Defamation, harassment, identity fraud. Turns out there are a lot of laws about that kind of thing. My lawyer says we have an excellent case. I didn't have a lawyer, but Madison didn't know that. I don't know what you're talking about, she stammered. Of course you don't, I said sweetly. I'm sure it's all just a misunderstanding. Anyway, I need to get to class. See you at home. I walked away, leaving her standing there, and I could feel the balance shifting. Madison had spent the summer building a narrative about poor, jealous Vera who lied and manipulated. But now I'd walked in with proof of innocence and hints of powerful connections. The story was changing, whether she liked it or not. By Friday, the entire school was buzzing with competing narratives. Madison's friends were still pushing the Vera is jealous story, but it was losing steam against the Vera just spent 6 weeks with European nobility counter-narrative. People were confused, fascinated, unsure who to believe. The homecoming rally was scheduled for last period in the gymnasium. That's when they'd announce the court and crown the king and queen. I knew from my first life that Madison would win. The votes had been cast in July before my return when her Whisper campaign was in full effect. I didn't care. I'd already won a better game, but I hadn't anticipated what would happen during the rally itself. The gym was packed, everyone in school colors, the cheer squad leading chants. The principal took the microphone and started announcing the court. Madison was called for queen, of course, along with her boyfriend Tyler for king. When my name was called as a court member, there were mixed reactions. Some cheers, some boos, uncertainty in the air. We all walked onto the court in our formal wear. Madison looked perfect, as always, in a designer dress that our parents had definitely paid for. I was wearing something simpler, elegant, that I'd paid for myself. The principal cleared his throat. Before we do the crowning, we have a special announcement. We've received a video message from a special guest addressed to one of our students. It's quite unusual, but they were very insistent. The lights dimmed. The projector flickered on. And Duchess Helena Rothschild appeared on the screen. I felt my heart stop. What was happening? "Good afternoon," the Duchess said, her cut-glass accent filling the gymnasium. "I apologize for the intrusion, but I wanted to send a special message to one of your students. Vera, dear, could you come forward?" Every eye in the place swung to me. I walked forward, stunned, having no idea what was happening. "Vera," the Duchess continued, "I wanted to thank you publicly for your contributions to this summer's salon. Your insights, your leadership, your genuine kindness to the other participants made a profound impact. I also wanted to extend an offer formally in front of your community." She smiled. "The Rothschild Foundation would like to offer you a full scholarship to Ravencrest Academy, our family's preparatory school in Switzerland. This includes all tuition, housing, and expenses for the next 2 years, as well as guaranteed placement in your choice of university afterward. We believe you are exactly the kind of young woman who represents the future of global leadership." The gymnasium exploded into noise. Students were on their feet, some cheering, some talking excitedly, everyone stunned. "Additionally," the Duchess said, and the room quieted again, "I wanted to inform you that our foundation's youth board has selected you as this year's Rising Leader recipient. This comes with a grant of $100,000 to support your educational and entrepreneurial endeavors, as well as a formal mentorship program with members of our network." She paused, her expression growing slightly more serious. "I understand there has been some drama regarding your character this summer. Allow me to be clear, I have spent 6 weeks observing Vera closely, in an environment where pretense is impossible. She is a young woman of remarkable integrity, intelligence, and compassion. Any accusations to the contrary are, quite simply, false." Another pause. "Vera, the choice is yours. If you choose to accept our offer, we would be honored to welcome you in January. Think about it, and know that regardless of your decision, you have a champion and a friend in me." The video ended. The lights came back on. I stood there, frozen, as the reality of what had just happened sank in. The Duchess had just publicly validated me, offered me a life-changing opportunity, and obliterated Madison's entire narrative, all in front of the entire school. Slowly, I turned around. Madison was standing next to the principal, the plastic homecoming crown in her hands, her face absolutely white. She looked like she might be sick. Around us, students were going wild. My phone was already buzzing with notifications. I saw people pulling up searches for Ravencrest Academy and Rothschild Foundation, their eyes getting wider as they realized what they were reading. The principal cleared his throat again. "Well, that was certainly unprecedented. Shall we continue with the crowning?" But no one was paying attention anymore. The student body had collectively realized that while Madison was getting a plastic tiara, I'd just been offered an actual crown. A place in the halls of real power, real prestige, real success. Madison went through the motions. The crown was placed on her head. She smiled for the photos. Tyler kissed her cheek. She waved to the crowd. But everyone was looking at me. The dance itself was almost anticlimactic. Madison held court in her homecoming crown, surrounded by her loyal friends, trying to recapture some sense of victory. But the mood had shifted irreparably. People kept coming up to me, congratulating me, asking about Switzerland, about the Duchess, about Ravencrest. Some apologized for believing the fake messages. Others just wanted to bask in proximity to someone who'd suddenly become interesting. "You must be so excited," one girl gushed. "Ravencrest Academy, do you know how many world leaders went there?" "I'm still thinking about it," I said honestly. "It's a big decision." Are you kidding? You have to go. This is like, this is huge. It was huge. The Duchess's public endorsement had done more than just offer me a scholarship. It had marked me as someone worth knowing, someone with powerful connections, someone with a future that extended far beyond our high school walls. Madison found me by the punch bowl, her crown slightly askew. "Quite the performance," she said, her voice low and sharp. "Did you plan that? Have your rich friend humiliate me?" "I didn't know she was going to do that," I said truthfully. "But yes, Madison, I absolutely plan to become someone worth her attention. I plan to build something real. I planned to stop being your victim." "My victim," she scoffed. "You're so dramatic, I never—" "You've spent our entire lives sabotaging me," I interrupted. "The fake messages this summer were just the latest in a long line of cruelties, but you know what? I don't even care anymore because I've already left. You're still fighting for a plastic crown in a high school gym. I'm building an actual life." Her hand tightened on her punch cup. "You think you're so special now? You think your internet friends and your summer camp make you better than me?" "I don't think I'm better than you, Madison. I think I'm finally free of you. And that's all I ever wanted." I walked away, leaving her standing there with her crown and her anger. On my way out, I passed our parents, who'd come to watch Madison's moment of glory. They saw me, looked confused, like they weren't quite sure what had happened or what it meant. I smiled at them, waved, and kept walking. The next week was a whirlwind. The video of the Duchess's announcement went viral. My social media platforms exploded. News outlets picked up the story. Small-town teen offered scholarship to elite academy. The narrative had completely flipped from troubled girl with fake messages to inspiring success story. Madison's manipulation had been exposed not through my accusations, but through simple contrast. The Duchess's character reference was unimpeachable. People started questioning the summer's drama, started looking more closely at the fake messages, started noticing patterns in how Madison operated. By the time the forensic evidence actually leaked, I never figured out who did it, though I had my suspicions. It was just confirmation of what people had already concluded. Madison had created a smear campaign. She'd fabricated evidence, she'd lied. The backlash was swift and brutal. Students who'd participated in spreading the lies were embarrassed. Madison's inner circle started to distance themselves. She went from queen bee to pariah in the span of days, and our parents finally had to confront reality. Dad asked to talk, which really meant he wanted to lecture me about family loyalty and not embarrassing Madison. I listened politely, then asked him why family loyalty seemed to only flow in one direction. He had no answer. Mom cried, said she'd had no idea Madison was so cruel, though I could see in her eyes that she'd known. She'd just chosen not to see it because it was easier, more comfortable, less complicated. "What do you want from us?" she asked finally. "An apology? We're trying here, Vera." "I don't want anything," I said honestly. "I just want to live my life without being undermined at every turn. That's it." "Your sister is having a hard time," Mom tried. "This has been really difficult for her." "She created this situation," I said flatly. "She chose to attack me instead of just being happy with what she had. Those are consequences, not cruelty." I'd learned something important in my 2 lives. You couldn't make people see what they didn't want to see. Mom would always find excuses for Madison. Dad would always prioritize Madison's needs. That was just who they were. But I didn't need them to change. I just needed to be free of their influence over my life. By October, I'd made my decision. I would accept the Duchess's offer. I'd finish out the semester at home, then transfer to Ravencrest in January. 2 years in Switzerland, surrounded by people who were building futures instead of tearing others down. 2 years to grow, learn, and position myself for the life I wanted. Madison's homecoming crown sat on her dresser, a physical symbol of a hollow victory. She'd gotten what she wanted and lost everything that mattered. Her reputation was destroyed. Her friends had abandoned her. Even Tyler, her homecoming king, had broken up with her, tired of the drama. She tried to apologize to me once, late one night. I was packing for a weekend trip to New York, another speaking engagement, another opportunity. "I'm sorry," she said from my doorway, her voice small. "I know you probably don't believe me, but I am. I didn't mean for things to get so out of hand. I looked at her, really looked at her. She was still beautiful, still talented, but she was also hollow, empty of anything real. She'd spent so much energy trying to destroy me that she'd forgotten to build herself into someone worth being. You're right, I said quietly. I don't believe you, because you're not sorry you did it. You're sorry you got caught. You're sorry it didn't work. If I hadn't had proof, if the Duchess hadn't vouched for me, you'd still be smearing my name and feeling perfectly justified. That's not. It is, I said. And the saddest part is that it didn't have to be this way. We could have both succeeded. We could have supported each other. But you were so obsessed with making sure you had more than me that you couldn't stand to see me have anything at all. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. What happens now? Now I leave, I said simply. I go to Switzerland. I build a life you can't touch. And you figure out who you are when you're not defined by tearing me down. Are you ever going to forgive me? I thought about my first life, about dying alone in that apartment, about the years of systematic destruction she'd put me through. I thought about this second chance, about how I'd used it not for revenge, but for freedom. I don't know, I said honestly. Maybe someday. But Madison, I don't need to forgive you to move on. I've already moved on. You're the one who has to figure out how to live with what you did. January arrived with snow and new beginnings. The day I left for Ravencrest, our parents drove me to the airport. Madison stayed home. She'd been accepted to Yale, on her own merit this time with her own essay. But the offer felt hollow to her now. She'd be going to an Ivy League school while carrying the reputation of a manipulative liar, while I'd be attending a school that mattered more than names, that offered connections money couldn't buy. At the airport, Mom hugged me. Call us, she said. Let us know how you're doing. I will, I promised. And I meant it. Despite everything, they were still my parents. I'd learned that you could set boundaries with people without hating them, could protect yourself without destroying them. Dad shook my hand awkwardly. Make us proud, Vera. I'll make myself proud, I corrected gently. That's what matters. The flight to Zurich was long but peaceful. I spent it thinking about both my lives, the one I'd lost and the one I was building. In my first life, I'd been a victim, defined by what was done to me. In this one, I was choosing to be a victor, defined by what I did for myself. The Duchess met me at the school personally, her car waiting outside the airport. Welcome back, dear, she said, pulling me into a hug. Are you ready? Yes, I said, looking out at the Swiss mountains, at the future stretching ahead of me, at the life I'd fought so hard to claim. I'm ready. The next 2 years at Ravencrest were transformative. The school was everything I'd imagined and more. Rigorous academics, incredible teachers, students from around the world who were all driven to achieve something meaningful. I thrived there in ways I never could have at home. My financial literacy platform grew into an actual business, with Amara as my technical partner and Sophia's family as investors. By the time I graduated, we had over 5 million users and partnership deals with major financial institutions. I got accepted to Oxford for university with multiple scholarship offers. I chose the Rhodes Scholarship, which seemed fitting, a full circle from the girl who died in poverty to the woman who'd built her own empire. Madison and I stayed in sporadic contact. She went to Yale, graduated with honors, got a good job at a consulting firm. She was successful by any normal measure, but our relationship never recovered, and I was okay with that. Some bridges, once burned, aren't meant to be rebuilt. Our parents eventually came to understand, in their limited way, what had really happened. They were proud of my success, though they never quite grasped how much they'd failed me in my first life, how complicit they'd been in Madison's cruelty. That was okay too. I'd learned that you don't need people to fully understand in order to forgive them and move on. 5 years after that homecoming dance, I returned home for a visit. Madison was engaged, planning a wedding. She seemed happy, or at least content. She'd grown up, matured, learned some hard lessons about the cost of cruelty. We met for coffee, just the two of us, in the cafe where we'd spent our childhood getting hot chocolates after school. You look good, she said, studying me across the table. Successful. I am, I said simply. Happy too. I really am sorry, she said, for everything. I know I said it before, but I mean it now. I was cruel. I was jealous. I was so afraid that if you shined, somehow my light would dim. It took me a long time to realize that's not how light works. I looked at her, at my sister, and saw something I hadn't in either of my lives: genuine remorse, growth, change. I believe you, I said, and I did. Can we can we try again? Not to go back to how things were, but maybe to build something new? I thought about it, about both my lives, about all the pain and triumph, about how I'd learned that holding on to anger was just another kind of prison. Maybe, I said, small steps, no expectations, just honesty. I can do that, she said. We talked for 2 hours, really talked, possibly for the first time ever. It wasn't a fairy tale reconciliation. There was too much history, too much hurt. But it was a beginning, a tiny seed of something that might, someday, grow into a relationship worth having. When I left, I drove past our old high school. They'd since renamed the football field after a donor, and the homecoming traditions had evolved with new generations of students who had no memory of Madison's crown or my vindication. It all seemed so small now, so distant. That plastic crown that Madison had fought so hard for was probably in a box somewhere, forgotten, meaningless. But the real crown, the education, the connections, the success, the freedom, that was mine forever. Built by my own hands, claimed by my own courage, secured by my own determination to never be a victim again. I'd been given a second chance at life, and I'd used it not to destroy my enemy, but to free myself from a game I'd never wanted to play. Madison had taken my homecoming crown, but after Rebirth, I was already wearing a real one. And that made all the difference.